resilience, what it is, what it isn't, and what it could be. Now, I want to give a shout out to all of our audience members. We have people registered from all over, from Vancouver to Canada, Exeter to Ancaster, San Francisco to Buenos Aires, and Bogota to Lima. We encourage all of you joining us from home to share this conversation on social media. We love seeing how you're watching us, so feel free to take a picture or capture your favorite moments from the talks and conversation. Use our hashtag Walrus Talks, and we're at the Walrus on the different platforms. Our moderator this evening is a writer and a producer and a former Walrus TD Fellow on Disability and Inclusion. You're in for a treat. I'm excited to welcome back Amy Lowe. Amy, great to see you.
Thanks, Jen. Well, the treat is truly all mine. What a spectacular gathering of stories and perspectives tonight. I'm so grateful to the Walrus for the opportunity to moderate today. It's awesome to be back. And I want to thank Vinita, Jeff, Philomena, and Justin for your thoughtful and engaging talks tonight. I've got a lot of questions, and I'm sure the audience has too. So without further ado, I'm going to invite the speakers back now. So come on down, Vinita, Jeff, Philomena, and Justin. We're going to start the Q&A. And just to let the folks out there watching know, submit us a question in the Zoom chat box, please. We really want to hear your thoughts, and we'll do our best to get to all of them. Maybe we will, but if we don't, we see them, we love them. So please keep sending them in. So my first question is for you, Vinita, and I really appreciated your point that focusing on resilience can remove focus from social or structural barriers. And I wanted to ask you to go a little bit further in what the relationship between resilience and fairness is for you in your point of view.
What do you mean by fairness? Are you talking about equity, or what kind of fairness?
I don't know. I've thrown the word out to you because you used the word in your talk and it kind of perked my interest. So take it in any direction that you'd like.
Well, the idea of resilience being something that we can celebrate is, do you mean justice? I guess that was the question. When you say fairness, are you talking about resilience and justice, that idea of resilience? I guess my main critique of resilience is really as the idea that we can ask whole communities to continue to be resilient, even though we have these massive structural inequalities within our own land, within our own country. We have massive inequalities. And so when we talk about celebrating communities as, celebrating children or celebrating communities as being resilient, isn't that child amazing that they go to school and they can't use the drinking fountain in their school, or they go to school and there's police presence in their school, but they get through it, they're resilient. And that's the critique that I'm trying to make, that there is a lack of equity. There's a lack of equity across the board when it comes to how different children, what kind of access different children have to different services. And so that's the critique of resilience. That's the idea of fairness, I guess you're talking about. This is the idea of equality.
Thanks. I noticed some similarities between your point and Philomena's idea of the gospel of resilience. So Philomena, do you want to just jump in and tell us a little bit more about what you mean by the gospel of resilience?
Resilience is considered at least one of the so-called strength-based approaches. I think it became popular because it moved away from considering people's deficits to focusing on their strengths. That's a good thing. The concern I have is resilience is a neoliberal, for the most part, Eurocentric word, in the sense that for one thing, it focuses on the individual. But we are talking about a lot of populations that are we call them collectivist cultures. They are communal, which means that they may not, these cultures may not want what we want or everything that we want. Their successes and whatever is driving them may not be the same. But also, I end my speech with talking about the fact that we don't really know these people well, because much of what exists in current knowledge is from the mainstream. So when we talk about, we know they need support. We know you cannot make someone resilient without adding support system. But even developing that support system is a problem, because they remain highly under-researched. We know very little about their ways of knowing and being. So that's what concerns me about when I call it the gospel of resilience. That is a conversation of the mainstream hoisted on us.
Mm-hmm. And the mainstream, you mean what you mentioned as Eurocentric kind of, what people might consider Western kind of ideas. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I love that too, the gospel of resilience. That was beautiful.
It's so catchy too, right? Like I'm going to be thinking about that for a while.
Talk about.
Mm-hmm. And it kind of brings in a question that I have for you, Justin, which is, you mentioned survival. You use the word survival in so many different instances in your talk. The arts industry before the pandemic, 12-hour days, the need to tell the right story in order to survive, and even, water and access to water. And so I'd love to hear your thoughts on the relationship that you envision between survival and resilience.
Growing up and raised in this world of Western ideologies and structures, and a lot of what remains of the culture, and not really kind of being like a third world within these two different worlds that we kind of live in. Both my parents went to residential school. I'm very fortunate. I just turned 34 in March, but I'm kind of a part of that first generation who hasn't gone to residential school. But I always talk about a lot of the things that I've been through as an individual, and you compare that to someone who's gone to residential school, you wouldn't be able to really tell the difference of who went and who didn't, how much the effects were still very present. So, my parents, being scared by the church to even speak the language, kind of put that fear of the devil to a culture that they are and they're a part of, and not growing up so much with that cultural ideologies and the structure of that, and this Western world, going to school on the reserve, learning about the outside world, and not feeling a part of it. Where I come from, I feel that I'm one of the very few who has gotten out, who has survived. And I feel a lot of privilege within that, even within my community. I moved back here by choice, which is almost a privilege, where a lot of families still have to access drinking water. Lethbridge is an hour drive, Calgary is like a 2-hour drive. We're still within means, but if you don't have a vehicle, you're kind of screwed in the middle of nowhere, right? So this idea of survival and resilience doesn't make sense for me. It's a very Western ideology of survival, and survival is the Western ideology of resilience. So identifying with those, or feeling that I'm a part of any of those, it's just the way of life that is currently still present in this world. Education, clean water, language, culture. A lot of the people who've grown up on the reserve, I'm very fortunate that, through my artistic career and interest into the culture, that's how I was able to kind of re-immerse myself into back into the culture. But a lot of people have lived here, don't know nothing about the culture, don't know that there's not a word for art, and so a lot of people don't speak the language. But then there are some who are my age who know so much more than me, and are raised by the old people and know so much more. But so this idea of survival and resilience.
I like how you said survival is
it's
art. Art is survival. Like that was really beautiful. How
Yeah,
you,
thank you.
yeah, it's just amazing to me. It really struck something for me that you're saying in Blackfoot, there's no word for art because everything is art.
Yeah, you have to survive on art, or else you don't know which direction is where. These songs of survival, and how you do certain ceremonies of survival. And when you hunt, we only had 2 seasons, really. We only had the first snowfall and the first thunderstorm that determined what was coming next. But all of these ceremonial practices were in essence of when the berries grow, when you harvest, what was coming next. Everything has a chain reaction, and without these ceremonies and without these paintings or these pictographs or songs, you would starve to death. So a culture that has survived here, dating back a minimum 14,000 years, every aspect and every facet within this, and I identify as a disabled artist, which is very new to me because, again, it was survival and resilience. So it's hard for me to determine what that is when you're living it every day. And the Mad Deaf Disabled arts community has taken me in and kind of helped identify that for me when I never did that most of my life, right? So it's in the culture, we do have Blackfoot Sign Language. It was always a part of it. So it wasn't used if it was a disability. It was constantly built into the culture so that no one was ever excluded from anything. We look at mental health, people who can see things that we can't see, we're the ones who can see onto the other side. It's considered schizophrenia, and it's, you're given a bunch of medication, or it's treated something different that actually aggravates a part of those. When it was accepted in the culture for the ones who can see the ones that we can't see and can communicate to the other side. So again, those 2 worlds of this Western world and this Indigenous world, and how
Thanks,
it has
Justin.
evolved here. Sorry, yes.
No,
I keep
really,
going.
No,
My bad.
it's
Sorry
amazing
for
to
taking
hear your
space.
thoughts. And honestly, it kind of leads into something that I wanted to touch on with Jeff, which was I love the way that you kind of use sound to tell your story, Jeff. And you mentioned the sound that child made when they tried out your chair for the first time. And in all aspects of your talks tonight, you talked about access in different ways, and like you mentioned, Renita, equity in different ways. And so I wanted to ask you, Jeff, what did hearing that sound of that child at the summer camp tell you or evoke in you about access to tech or wheelchairs, specifically for young kids with disabilities?
Yeah, I mean, I guess that moment really crystallized things in many ways for me, because as an athlete, you're given things, you're given technology and clothes and sunglasses and opportunities to participate in programs and training and coaching and support that is not available to everyone. And this kid, by providing him with something that he didn't have access to, gave him an opportunity that he wouldn't have had. And that's what accessibility is about. It's about opening doors and letting people into venues and programs and opportunities. But it's important to give people the things that they need, access to the things that they need. And so the technology that helped me as a racer and possibly help this kid with a mobility disability wouldn't be the correct thing to provide, the right sound of support to give to someone who had something else that they needed, some other aspect, some door that they needed to be opened. And I think everyone, all of the speakers have touched on that, where we have to understand the world that we're part of, participate in it, and get the most out of it by including the most people that we can, by opening the doors as wide as we can. And that's what I mean when I talk about making the sound of support. It comes in many different shapes and configurations, and it's of course an analogy, and sounds can be actions or behaviors or changes to systems, but we have to make those changes, and we have to make not just the sound of support, but the correct sound for the people that we're surrounded by, for the excellence that we're surrounded by, to make the most of both the people and the excellence.
Thanks, Jeff. And I have a question that may sort of lead from that, from Kate, who's an audience member. And Kate asks, and I'll just throw this out to all of you, so please do jump in. Kate asks, has the term resilience been weaponized to diminish legitimate complaints and the call for meaningful action?
I think in some ways it has. I mean, I think this idea of continuously wanting to celebrate the resilience of whole entire communities means that in some ways, I mean, I don't know if I would use the word weaponized, but it's this idea of trying to take the fire out of something, that we're going to celebrate you for the strength that you have, which is great. It's like what Dr. Phil was saying about the strength approach. It's great. It's lovely, but at the same time, we can't just keep celebrating whole communities for getting through something. It's that, I mean, I guess that's your sense of fairness. That's just not fair. That's not a just, that doesn't make sense. So we want to celebrate this idea of community. And I don't know the question, the answer to that question about are we weaponizing it? I don't know if it's as strong as a weapon, to say it like that. But it's definitely something that's trying to take the fire, I think, out of, or the burn out of the injustice.
So it's also the exit strategy, right, for redistribution, because if someone is resilient, you don't need to give them anything.
That's right.
So,
yeah.
Yeah, it's an escape valve.
It's an escape valve, Jeff. That's what it is. You're right.
This idea that we should be redistributing power and opportunity and all of these things that we need.
If I listen to Jeff's the example he gave, it rings to me as resilience, in the sense that it's not a state of being. It's, I was doing something and somehow I was pulled up and I moved up, or somebody did something. What I see in what I call the gospel of resilience is that it has become a state of being. It's not we celebrate Vinita's resilience and then what can we do from now on? Where is it going? It's not a one-time thing, but what we now want is for that to stay. Oh, she's resilient, or this community is resilient. And that's the end of the matter. Resilience should not be a state of being. It should be something that happened. And then where do we go? Because what he does, that he keeps basically cleaning up the fact that people need support systems, that the support systems are not in place to fight the systemic barriers. As we keep moving into resilience, we keep losing sight of the systemic barriers that people face. That's really what concerns me. So every time I add the word resilience, I always add the word capacity to move on, ability to amplify whatever I have. It's the thing about, you're just resilient. You have the capacity to survive. And I'm also a little bit concerned about the word survive, because many of us, a lot of people in the margins are already survivors. So in my village, people will say that we don't boast with suffering. You're supposed to suffer to get at something, not to continue to suffer for the rest of your life. But that is where those who live at the margins, that's where they are left, to just keep going on.
I really appreciate your point about it not being a consistent state. I mean, think of the energy that goes into that effort, right? And working towards something should yield something. That's sort of what I'm hearing from you. I appreciate that. Yeah. Someone else wrote in and asked, so not to focus on words per se, but Lauren asks, resilience as a word can polarize instead of unify because not everyone feels resilient. So Lauren asks, is there another way that we can talk about these things that may not lead to some people feeling ashamed of their inability to achieve what they need or have access to what they need or want?
I kind of like something that is action related, because that's what society, that's what we need now. I like the celebration and all of that, but I am looking at the ways that we can reach out and begin to uplift individuals and communities. I don't think it matters to me much what it is called as opposed to what it yields. So I think it's the yield that is more important to me. I don't think there is one word to go around because we are a very diversified group. Canada is a multicultural society. And even if you remove the rest of us and just leave the indigenous people on their lands, they are a diversified group too. So, and I don't think they can all come together and call it something. For me, I want to focus on the yield.
That's awesome. That's an awesome reminder. And I think
the danger is the patronizing aspect of it. You know, when it becomes a little bit like patronizing, like, oh, you're so resilient. You know, it's this idea of like tapping people on the shoulders and you did so great and here's a medal, here's an award, and you know, tell us about your trauma. And you know, but then it's like as you're saying, Philomena, it's like, what's the yield? So then what's the result? What happens? So even if we're honoring you in a patronizing way for your resilience, what's the next step? What's going to happen after that?
Justin, do you have any thoughts to add to this part of the conversation?
I mean, there's always so much to add. But no, it's been really great just having all these different points of views and really great questions. Yeah, I don't know. To me, it's very complex when you are still surviving, when you are being resilient. You know, it's hard to identify what that is. And for me, within this household where we are, I'm the one that sees that this is a problem, or this is bizarre, that this is how you live, or how you need to survive, you know, and the resilience in that when it's completely normalized because that's just the way things are, right? So I also kind of feel like an outsider when I'm here, because again, bringing in that privilege, I know what it's like to have a long shower or not worry about is my water safe to drink, you know, wherever I live. You know, I live many places in Canada. So yeah, so that's a part of that. And one of the things I couldn't quite comprehend after the fact is bringing one of these old stories of Holy Bear Woman, who was a survivor of a massacre, who was Blackfoot, just on the U.S. side. But we didn't have borders like that. We had cultural borders. Someone was saying, you know, if you left all the indigenous people, we would be diverse as well, because we don't speak the same languages. The linguistics are somewhat the same. The sign language is somewhat the same. But, you know, we didn't have those borders. Sorry, went off the topic. But yeah, talking about Holy Bear Woman and bringing the story that took about 8 years to bring back to the people, either to remind or to teach a lot of the new generations who this woman was, and the large bloodline that we come from this one individual of like over 300 people who were massacred was a child. But even that, of having to raise with artistic funds and pools and donations of almost $500,000 in 8 years, where that money could have been put, that $500,000 could have, you know, I could have dug a well for my parents' place. You know, we could have fed so many different people. I could have used that, but it took, you know, that much financial effort of $500,000 to bring to life back to a place that is still so struggling financially of basic needs, right? So it's always bizarre, and I'm always challenged with that. And so it's really great to hear all these other perspectives.
Yeah, I mean, this has been such a rich conversation, and there's so much more that we could say. Unfortunately, our time is wrapping up. So I just want to thank you, and I hope that we can continue this conversation offline and on in any format that works, you know, on social media, or just keep in touch. So I want to thank our speakers so much. Jeff, Vanita, Philomena, Justin, thank you so much. And thanks to the Walrus for organizing this conversation. And with that, I'm going to hand it back to you, Jen.
Thank you so much, Amy. I'd also like to thank our speakers and everyone who joined us for this important conversation. Vanita Srivastava, Justin Many Fingers, Philomena Okeke, Hijurka, and Jeff Adams. And again, Amy, you are an excellent moderator. It's great to be working with you again. Also, shout out to everyone in chat. We really appreciated your questions and comments throughout the evening. If you enjoyed this event, we have more coming up on Tuesday, June 8th. We are partnering with Facebook Canada to present the Walrus Talks at Home, the future of speech online. Check in with us at thewalrus.ca/events. That's where you'll find our event schedule. You can register for events. We also post videos from all of our events. So that's where you'll see videos from tonight as well. You can go into our archives. Also, keep an eye on your email inbox. You're going to receive an email from us. And the best way to stay in touch and to never miss an event like this one is to opt in and sign up for our events newsletter. At the Walrus, we believe that trustworthy journalism is really an essential service. And with your support, we can continue to provide fact-checked, long-form journalism that Canadians can count on. So if you enjoyed this free event tonight, please consider making a donation at thewalrus.ca. Just click on donate. All gifts of $20 or more receive a charitable tax receipt. Thank you again to Naki Osute and everyone at TD Bank Group for making this conversation possible, but as well our long-standing partnership together. Thank you to our annual sponsors, Inspire, Labatt Breweries of Canada, Air Canada, Shaw, and our newest annual sponsor, Facebook Canada. Community is so important in these COVID times, and you are all part of the Walrus. Thanks again so much for joining us. Have a great evening, everyone.